Hi, people. So, this one's directed at perhaps newish subscribers, people who've come across the channel and perhaps joined, and also people who perhaps just come across the channel you may not have fully subscribed. Of course, like any channel, I wanted to grow, and I would respectfully ask people to consider subscribing. Um, but I will say that I've had a number of responses recently that I feel obliged to address regarding the centrism in my name, because I do feel like it's a broken record. That is to say, I feel like having to justify myself and explain and defend this as a broken record, and I'm not going to keep doing it. But it's been a few people, so I will address it. Um, I should say I don't want to be too negative. I've had many positive responses, and the overall ratio of likes and dislikes on this channel, it's honestly about 75 to 80% likes versus about 20% dislikes. It varies by video. You know, some videos I just rattle a few people. The one I made on the Green Party, for example, recently, it was, I ruffled a few feathers. I think it was like 90% dislikes because obviously Green Party supporters didn't like what I was saying. Um, but I always find it interesting the videos where I tend to provoke people contradict some of the claims that are made about me and my channel, which is to say that I'm this woolly minded centrist who doesn't know what he is. Um, I'm going to just read out a comment from the video I made on the Cambridgeshire attack because I think it exemplifies what I'm talking about. And this is not to try and shame the person. That's not my intention. It's more to directly address the point I'm making because it's a good example of the sort of thing that I occasionally see. And it's this. This is from Rafal Ganovitz, 1979. You make some good points, but for the love of God, please stop with the centrist nonsense. Anyone that calls himself centrist in these times almost always turns out to be left-wing. They screech I'm a centrist, then proceed to only criticise the right, aka normal people, which isn't centrist. So much so that I instantly think lefty as soon as I see centrist. Well, I don't quite know how to take that, Raphael, because on one hand you're saying I make good points, on the other you go on to make a sweeping attack on how I define myself. I would address, and that's just typical of the sort of thing I've been seeing regarding attacks on my centrism. Um, I would highlight something I saw a while back, a little meme showing this person in the middle and people on the left and people on the right. And the person in the middle said, I think you both make good points. And then the lefties pushed the person towards the right. And the little thing was why centrists are more driven to the right. And yet I'm seeing a contradictory message such as this. Anyone that calls himself a centrist is a lefty. Look, it's really not complicated. I think that there's people out there like myself who have views on particular subjects that they know veer more to the right or more to the left. My views on crime are unquestionably conservative. And any left-leaning people who've come across this channel would probably agree with that. They'd say I hold conservative views on the issue. They know that because we've had, strong differences of opinion on the subject. So there you go. That's an issue where I'm clearly well to the right. I believe there should be tougher sentencing, particularly for young offenders. I think the criminal justice system is out of touch, etc., etc. Those are definitely conservative positions. Yet, on other issues, particularly around welfare and some issues of immigration, I wouldn't say immigration as a whole, but some aspects of it. For example, I'm strongly against making things harder for people to come to this country, just adding bureaucracy to people who are playing by the rules, for example. I am strongly critical of Donald Trump. I do not trust the Reform Party, and I loathe Elon Musk. So if that makes me a lefty, then so be it. I don't think actually those are particularly left-wing positions. They're just not particularly right-wing positions. But in the end of the day, I am not going to say that I'm a conservative or a lefty because it would be, how could I? when I know that some of my positions don't fare to that. You know, one reason I left the Liberal Democrat Party back in 2010, there were several reasons for it, but one reason I left is I felt like I would be a hypocrite. Because I held hardline views on crime, my views were well to the right of what the party I was in was all about. And whilst the Liberal Democrats probably aren't as left-wing as, say, the Greens on this issue, they are definitely to the left on the issue. So that's one reason I left them, because I thought I would be a hypocrite to stand for a party where I fundamentally had a different point of view on an important issue. Anyway, I don't want to draw too much attention to this thing, but I am so fed up of having to justify myself. People coming onto my channel and saying, "Oh, you're not really a centrist," or "Centrists are just people who don't want to voice their conviction." I'm very opinionated, and if you want to interpret a video whereby I'm holding a more left-wing view, as therefore I'm not a true centrist, or I'm holding a more right-wing view, as therefore I'm not a true centrist, that's your problem. That's your problem for being a partisan. I mean, I refuse to apologise for not being a partisan. And that to me is where the criticism is coming from. The fact that they are so blinded by their own extreme partisan attitude. That's not my problem. And I'm not going to keep doing this periodically, interrupting the flow of my videos to say, "Oh, look, I need to justify my centrism." I've chosen the name because that's how I feel I am. It doesn't mean I'm smack bang in the middle on every issue. This really isn't rocket science. And I challenge you people that are criticising me for calling myself this. How should someone who has, say, left-wing views on one issue and right-wing views on another, how should they define themselves, if not a centrist? Answer that. Kindly answer that. Help me out here. I mean, I am very comfortable with what I believe in. And it's not... I've got no obligation to have to please others in that sense. So if you disagree with one of my views, fine, say so. But just stop the crap about attacking my centrism. You know, criticise my viewpoints, say that I'm wrong about this for X, Y, and Z reasons, fine. But, you know, it's not up to you to determine what I am. If someone's coming out with a very left-wing point of view, then it stands to reason that people will consider they're a lefty. If they're coming out with a very right-wing view, it stands to reason that people will consider they're right-wing. But with someone who is showing a track record of criticising or endorsing both sides, then it points to a fair conclusion that their overall point of view is centrist. That's really not rocket science. You know, if I was constantly... Here's the point. If I was constantly coming out with left-wing views and I call myself a centrist, then the criticism would be valid, that I'm being a bit dishonest and I'm actually just a lefty. If I was constantly coming out with right-wing positions, then it would stand to reason that I wasn't being entirely honest and I was actually a right-winger. But I know for a fact that my track record... Feel free to look up this channel. You know, go back to scroll through my videos and you will find a very mixed record in terms of left and right wing positions. That's all there is to it. And if you can't be bothered to do that, fine. But just don't try and pigeonhole me because your own partisan reaction wants to do that. I'm a centrist because my views ultimately balance out that way. That's it. And that's all there is to it. So maybe try working on your partisan bias rather than attacking a guy who's just trying to be honest to his convictions.